You know that weird feeling when election day finally arrives, you go to your local polling place only to find that the guy you wanted to vote for has been entirely removed from the ballot. And he was removed from that ballot by 4 local judges from the opposition political party. And so you say, okay, well, that's weird. Let me just write his name in. However, those same judges, they instructed the local election officials to not count any write-in votes for that particular candidate. Now, if all this sounds to you like an election somewhere in Russia, in Brazil, or maybe Venezuela, well, you would be wrong. This is an election taking place over in Colorado, and perhaps California soon as well. Because you see, just yesterday, the Colorado State Supreme Court, they issued a ruling ordering the Secretary of State to remove President Trump's name from the 2024 ballot. And the details of how this Colorado case got to this point are truly revealing. And so today, let's go through the details of this case. Let's go through the court's decision. Let's go through how other states are using this court's decision to basically do the same thing in their respective states. Let's go through who's financing all of this behind the scenes, as well as perhaps the most important point, smashing those like and subscribe buttons so that this video can reach ever more people via the YouTube algorithm. And now, to start with, on several previous episodes, we've already discussed the lawsuits which have been filed in states across the whole country trying to get Trump removed from the ballot. The basic argument of all these different lawsuits is that since President Trump, quote unquote, engaged in an insurrection on January the 6th, he should no longer be eligible to hold office as per the 14th Amendment. And just for your reference, here is what the pertinent section of the 14th Amendment says. This is section number 3, quote, "No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof." And as you can likely guess, this amendment was enacted shortly after the U.S. Civil War in order to keep former members of the Confederacy out of government. But in the modern political context, opponents of President Trump are making the argument that he was involved in an insurrection on January the 6th, and therefore, as per the 14th Amendment, he should be barred from serving office in the future. And along that line, looking across America, you have 31 different cases having been filed in 26 different states, all looking to get Trump off the ballot in those individual municipalities. The map on your screen is where these lawsuits have sprung up. In each one of those states, there's been at least one lawsuit filed looking to get Trump kicked off the ballot. However, up until now, all these different cases across the whole country trying to make this happen, they were thrown out one after the other. And the reasons that they were thrown out, it varied from state to state. Some judges found that Trump did not engage in an insurrection. Other judges ruled that their Secretary of State doesn't have the authority to remove candidates from the ballot. Other judges, they determined that the wording of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it specifically did not apply to the office of the president, and so on and so on and so forth. The cases were dismissed for a variety of reasons. And this included what took place over in Colorado. Specifically, over in Colorado, quote, "You had 6 local voters represented by activist group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington who sued Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, demanding the election official take President Trump off of the state's primary ballot." This case eventually made it to trial, wherein, for about a week, you had these activist voters trying to prove that January 6th constituted an actual insurrection, that President Trump, quote-unquote, engaged in it, and that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applied to the office of the United States President. On the flip side, lawyers for Trump were making the exact counter-argument, that January 6th was not an insurrection, that President Trump did not engage in it regardless, and the third argument was that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment actually did not apply to the office of the president. These were the 2 competing arguments at trial. Now, eventually, the judge in this case, she ruled in favor of President Trump, although her ruling had kind of an interesting twist. That's because this lower court Colorado judge, she ruled that January 6th was an insurrection, that President Trump did engage in it. However, despite all that, she also found that the 14th Amendment actually did not apply to the office of the U.S. president. Here's what she wrote in her order, quote, "The petitioners argued that officer of the United States would certainly cover the highest office in the federal government, but there was scant evidence that that was the case. The authors of the 14th Amendment specifically listed offices, starting with the highest levels and descending thereafter. To lump the presidency in with any other civil or military office is odd indeed, and very troubling to the court because Section 3 explicitly lists all federal elected positions except the president and vice president." And so with that rationale, she ruled in favor of President Trump. However, the case was appealed to the Colorado Supreme Court, where, just yesterday, they overturned this lower court decision and they ordered that President Trump be removed from the 2024 ballot, the primary ballot initially, and then subsequently the general election ballot. Specifically, in a 4-3 split decision, the Colorado Supreme Court, they determined that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment did apply to the office of the president, that President Trump did engage in an insurrection, and therefore, they ordered the Secretary of State to remove his name from the ballot. So here's specifically what they wrote, quote, "We conclude that because President Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president under Section 3, it will be a wrongful act under the election code for the Secretary to list President Trump as a candidate on the presidential primary ballot. Therefore, the Secretary may not list President Trump's name on the 2024 presidential primary ballot, nor may she count any write-in votes cast for him." Now, by the way, just as an aside, it's worth mentioning that these 4 Colorado Supreme Court justices, in their official ruling, they made the determination that what took place on January the 6th qualified as an actual insurrection, and therefore it fell under the purview of the 14th Amendment. However, here's the interesting thing. Insurrection and rebellion are not just words. Insurrection and rebellion are actual legal crimes which are laid out in Section 18 of the U.S. Criminal Code, specifically subsection 2383. And so, it might be the case that you have people, politicians, and the mainstream media at large using the word insurrection when referring to January 6th, but from a legal perspective, no one has actually been found guilty of actual rebellion or insurrection. In fact, there was a phenomenal analysis that was in the pages of the New York Times of all places, and they summed it up rather succinctly. Quote, "Insurrection charges are considered difficult to prove and are exceedingly rare. While many people have called the events of January 6th an insurrection, the Justice Department has not charged any rioters with that crime. In addition to the handful of seditious conspiracy charges against members of 2 militias, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, prosecutors have charged various rioters with such crimes as assaulting police officers, obstructing an official congressional proceeding, and trespassing." But then, Hello? Oh, it's the sponsor of today's episode, Patriot Mobile, which for the past 10 years now has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And when I say only, trust me, they are the only ones. They're also, by the way, I should mention, great supporters of our program, which is why I'm really proud to partner with them. Now, Patriot Mobile is a great company. They offer dependable nationwide coverage, basically giving you the ability to access all 3 of the major networks. This means, in practice, that you can get the same coverage that you're used to, just without supporting all these companies that don't, well, to put it lightly, align with your values. Essentially, when you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're sending the message to these corporate American entities that you support free speech, you support religious freedom, you support the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, as well as, of course, our military veterans and first responders. Also, I should mention that their customer service team is based 100% right here in America, and they make switching super simple. You can keep your phone number, you can keep your phone, or you can actually upgrade your phone. And best of all, to our viewers, to the viewers of Facts Matter, you can get completely free activation when you use the promo code ROMAN. That's ROMAN, just like my name. And so head on over to patriotmobile.com/Roman, or you can just call 972-PATRIOT. Again, that's patriotmobile.com/Roman. I'll also throw the link. It'll be down in the description box below. However, despite the fact that no one has been charged with or found guilty of insurrection or rebellion, well, the Colorado State Supreme Court, they relied on expert testimony from scholars of political extremism to determine that January 6th was indeed an insurrection. If you actually want to read through the logic of the justices in terms of their reasoning, I'll throw a link to the PDF version of their full ruling. It'll be down in the description box below. You can read for it yourself if you're the type of person that likes to dig into the weeds. Regardless, though, getting back to what actually took place, because the Colorado State Supreme Court anticipated the fact that Trump and his legal team were going to appeal this decision all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, they actually put a hold on their own ruling. Quote, "The Colorado High Court, composed of all Democrat appointees, stayed its ruling until January 4th of 2024, pending any review by the U.S. Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court agrees to review the issue by January 4th, the Colorado Secretary of State will be required to continue to include President Trump on the primary ballot. Otherwise, he will be removed from the primary ballot." This means that Trump's legal team will now be appealing this decision to the U.S. Supreme Court, and if the court agrees to take up and review the case, Trump's name will still appear on the primary ballot while the case is still pending on the U.S. Supreme Court docket. However, if the Supreme Court either rejects the case or they accept it after January 4th, this means that Trump's name will be removed from the Colorado primary ballot. And if that were to happen, the Colorado Republican Party, they have already come out and they said that they will ditch the primaries altogether for a caucus selection system instead. Basically, instead of having a primary election, they will have local GOP chapter meetings where registered Republicans will be able to come together and choose their preferred candidate. It's a technical workaround, you can say. Regardless, after this ruling from the Colorado State Supreme Court, Joe Biden, he was asked about it while he was walking to his car. And after initially saying no comment, a reporter leaned in and he asked whether Joe Biden thought that Trump was an insurrectionist, to which Joe Biden responded by saying the following, quote, "I think that's certainly self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported insurrection, no question about it, none, zero. And he seems to be doubling down on everything." On the flip side, however, you had President Trump release a statement of his own through his campaign calling this ruling a shame for America. Quote, "Unsurprisingly, the all-Democrat appointed Colorado Supreme Court has ruled against President Trump, supporting a Soros-funded left-wing group's scheme to interfere in an election on behalf of crooked Joe Biden by removing President Trump's name from the ballot and eliminating the right of Colorado voters to vote for the candidate of their choice. The Colorado Supreme Court issued a completely flawed decision tonight, and we will swiftly file an appeal to the United States Supreme Court. We have full confidence that the U.S. Supreme Court will quickly rule in our favor and finally put an end to these un-American lawsuits." Now, if you caught it, in that statement of theirs, the Trump campaign referenced a Soros-funded left-wing group behind this ruling. And what they're referring to here are the two groups behind this Colorado case, the so-called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, as well as another group called Free Speech for People. And in regards to the funding sources for these two groups, quote, "Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington and Free Speech for People are backed by the Democrat-affiliated Act Blue organization, which enabled fundraising for Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Inevitably, both also turn out to have received money from Open Society Foundations, the jewel in the crown of George Soros's multi-billion Open Society Foundations organization." And so, behind it all are two nonprofits which have both received funding from George Soros's Open Society Foundations, and they're now using a law originally intended to exclude Confederate rebels from holding office to instead bar Americans from being able to vote for President Trump. Now, there is one last thing which is really worth mentioning here, which is the fact that the loss of Trump's name on the Colorado ballot, while of course disenfranchising the Republican voters in Colorado, well, otherwise it would not have much of an effect on the broader presidential election in the year 2024. After all, Colorado is deeply blue, and there was pretty much no chance that those electoral votes would go to Trump in any scenario. However, this Colorado Supreme Court ruling has set a precedent, which Democrats in other states are looking to follow. For instance, just earlier today, the Lieutenant Governor of California released a letter. It was addressed to the California Secretary of State, urging her to emulate Colorado and to find a way to get Trump's name off of the ballot in California as well. Here's part of what that letter said. Quote, "Based on the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling, I urge you to explore every legal option to remove former President Donald Trump from California's 2024 presidential primary ballot. The Colorado decision can be the basis for a similar decision here in our state. The Constitution is clear. You must be 35 years old and not be an insurrectionist. There will be the inevitable political punditry about a decision to remove Trump from the ballot, but this is not a matter of political gamesmanship. This is a dire matter that puts at stake the sanctity of our Constitution and our democracy. Time is of the essence, as your announcement of the certified list of candidates for the primary election is coming up next week on December 28th, 2023. And so, perhaps expect California to drop Trump's name from their ballot in the very near future as well. And just as a fun fact, this Lieutenant Governor of California, she recently launched a campaign to succeed Gavin Newsom and become the governor of California in the upcoming 2026 election. And wouldn't you know it, George Soros has already donated the maximum amount permissible under California law to her campaign. It's funny how it all works when you peel back the layers of the onion. If you'd like to go through the details of anything that we discussed in today's episode, I'll throw the links to all my research notes. They'll be down in the description box below for you to peruse at your own leisure. And also, I'd love to know your thoughts about this whole situation. Do you think that these courts, as well as these politicians, are correct, and that the 14th Amendment does in fact bar President Trump from serving in office again? Or do you think that this is just a naked political power play meant to essentially disqualify Biden's main rival at a time when Trump is surging in the polls? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave them in the comment section below. I'll be reading through them later tonight as well as well into the week. And then lastly, if you enjoyed today's episode and you're just thinking to yourself, man, I love this content. I just wish Roman would publish more episodes every single week. Well, you're in luck because I do. over on Epoch TV, our awesome no censorship video platform, I publish anywhere between 1 to 3 exclusive episodes of Facts Matter every single week, usually on topics that are quite frankly too spicy for here on YouTube. And so if you'd like to get access to those, in my opinion, phenomenal episodes, including a huge backlog from the last 2 or 3 years, well, you can find it all over on Epoch TV. And right now is a phenomenal time to check it out because the Epoch Times has recently launched their absolute best sale of the year. 6 full months for just a single dollar. A 6-month subscription for just $1. This is, again, the absolute best sale of the year. We make absolutely no money on this offer. The idea here is that it's a trial subscription to get you in the door so that you check out the content, you fall in love with the content, and then perhaps you be a subscriber for a long, long time to come. Years, perhaps even decades. If you'd like to check it out, the link to the sale page will be right there at the top of the description box below. You can click on that link. It'll take you to the sale page where you can try the Epoch Times for, again, 6 months for just a single dollar. You can cancel any time, but something tells me that you won't. Something tells me that you will indeed fall in love with the content and be a subscriber for a long, long time to come. Again, that link is right there at the top of the description box below. I hope you check it out. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.